Hello, my name's Tessa Rickson. I'm joining you today from Brisbane, Australia. And let me just quickly share my screen with you, and I will do our official sort of a brief welcome before we kick off into the main part of today's session. So as everyone sort of filters in. So I am the chair of ScenoLab Australia. And so ScenoLab is Australia's, it's a new hub, a new collaborative network for performance design education, research and practice. And we are also Australia's National Oyster Centre. So I do wish to start by acknowledging the traditional lands and owners. And in the spirit of reconciliation, ScenoLab Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We recognise that sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So thank you for joining us today. This is the third talk in a series that we have been running to celebrate involvement at World Stage Design 2025. So World Stage Design, if you're unfamiliar with it, is a massive global celebration and festival of performance design, technology and architecture that moves around every 4 years. And this year it is in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. And in our previous chats, we've heard from the director of World Stage Design, Jackie George, who came in to talk about all things World Stage Design with us. And then just recently, we had the team from Reaction Theatre coming to talk about their work that they're discussing overseas as well. And so this time, I'm really fortunate to have 4 artists, educators, researchers, all the slashes, people who are involved in World Stage Design 2025, who have kindly agreed to come in and to share about the works, whether it is an exhibition of performance design, a workshop that they are running, or a conversation initiative that they've started this year to really celebrate how people in our region of the world are going to be involved in this global celebration of performance design. So just a little bit of housekeeping for you. You're very welcome to ask questions throughout the session today. We'll probably leave questions to the end as we move through our three sessions. And you can use the chat to do that. We are recording today's talk. And so if you would prefer for your voice or for your video not to be captured in the recording, you can use the chat function to ask your question, and I'll read that out to the speakers as we go along. So today we have 4 speakers talking about 3 exhibitions, programs, workshops, involvements at World Stage Design. And so I'll quickly introduce to you the people whose faces you can see here. So we have Meg Rollandi, Roger Alsop, Imogen Ross, and Paula Martins. And so today, each of our speakers, so Meg, Roger, and then Imogen and Paula together have been given 10 minutes or so, roughly, to talk about what their involvement is at World Stage Design. And so it's a bit of a sort of broad brief that we gave people today. And it's really kind of just a chance to both celebrate the work that they are doing with World Stage Design, but also it's our hope that we can show other people in Australia and in our region as well what being involved in World Stage Design, or WSD, could look like. And so the next time it comes around in 4 years, yourself or your students or your colleagues might think about being involved as well. So our first speaker for today is the wonderful Meg Rollandi, who's here. So Meg is a performance designer and maker based in Whanganui, Aotearoa. She is a senior lecturer and spatial design subject lead at Taurau Massey University. Her creative practice engages interdisciplinary and collaborative design-led devising processes and intermedial performance. Meg's work has toured extensively internationally and across New Zealand. Meg curated the New Zealand Countries and Regions exhibit at the Prague Quadrennial in 2023, and recent highlights include performance design for Gravity and Grace, awarded gold at the Designers Institute New Zealand Best Awards, set designer and production of the year at the Wellington Theatre Awards 2024, working on My Night Moods of Total Theatre Award, Edinburgh Fringe 2019, London premiere at the Yard's Now 20 Festival, and Rising Melbourne 2022. And Meg is here to talk to us about her incredible work, Gravity and Grace, that has been accepted as a finalist as part of the World Stage Design exhibition. So Meg, I'll hand over to you to tell us more about your work.
Thank you, Tessa. Kia ora, everybody. Lovely to be here. I thought I could just go through the work Gravity and Grace that is the work that I submitted for the performance design competition part of World Stage Design, and maybe speak a little bit about how I'm planning to exhibit that. And then any questions and things you have, happy to answer those. So yeah, I've got some slides, and they're mostly just so that you're looking at something lovely while I'm talking. And I will share my screen. And that's all good. Everyone can.
Yep, that looks great.
Wonderful. So the work that I am exhibiting is it's a re-exhibition of Gravity and Grace, which is a work that was created by Eleanor Bishop and Karin McCracken, and it premiered last year in 2024 at the Aotearoa New Zealand Festival and at the Auckland Arts Festival. And the book is based on, the show is based on the book by Chris Kraus, Aliens and Anorexia. So it's an adaptation for the stage of that text. And essentially this is a work that involves 4 live cameras that are capturing a range of different pieces of footage throughout the performance, and then these are variously projected and arranged back into the space. Earlier this year, I gave a talk at the IFTR conference about staging interiority. Without going into heaps of detail about the quite complex story, I don't know if people are familiar with Chris Kraus's writing, but I guess she's we were drawn to the text because of Kraus's feminist lens, and then also the way that she approaches and kind of blurs autobiography, memory, and documentary. So we're really interested in the combination of those kinds of texts, that sort of auto-fiction. Yes, and so this book basically details her emotional decline and the decline of her mental and physical health after the failure of a film that she went to make, which was called Gravity and Grace. Sorry, right, there we go. Her book, Aliens and Anorexia, is her writing through and figuring out that she's in fact not, she feels that maybe filmmaking is not the best way for her to express herself, and sort of discovers that writing is. There I've written quite a good thing based on the work of thrilling autobiographical fiction by Chris Kraus. I won't read that all for you. But we were also really interested in how we could use live camera on stage to share different pieces of information that we don't otherwise really have access to within the theatre space, and to try and think about how we could also develop different kinds of languages for the cameras. So that was quite a big part of having so many different kinds of cameras, and then finding ways of finding the different ways that we might be able to project the information that those cameras were gathering. What else might I say about it? So I guess for World Stage Design particularly, we don't have a huge amount of space for our exhibitions. So as you can see in some of these images, and which was present throughout the whole of the design. We were really interested in layering and the layering of images and objects and spaces and people. So we sometimes refer to the whole stage as the inside of Chris Kraus's mind. But then within that, there's sort of more and more rooms and spaces. And some of those are real spaces that she is speaking about that we can show documentary footage of. And some of those are imagined spaces or memories of Chris Kraus's. So I guess a challenge for me is figuring out how I can represent this amount of layering that specifically happens in a show that happens over 2 hours is our total time. And so I think I'm going to make a book object, which I can speak to a bit more, but essentially trying to not trying to recreate or make a model of the stage space, but make something that I would say reflects the intentions of the work and some of the principles that guided how we used space and how we used image and how we used artifacts to translate that into a different kind of exhibition rather than maybe just playing footage of the show or showing photo stills. So I can, if anyone has questions about that, I can speak some more to it. Yeah. Should I say some more, Tessa, or?
Yeah, Meg, you've still got a couple of minutes if you wanted to expand on maybe sort of the idea you mentioned before of creating a book as a means of exhibiting this quite complex or, capturing the live performance in an exhibition.
Yeah. For sure. I think another thing that's maybe worth mentioning is our show was initially cancelled due to COVID in 2022, just before the New Zealand Festival that year. We went back into a not a lockdown, but Omicron happened. And so we were about to present the work and then we were kind of given another 2 years to develop it. But as a result of that, like we all really, really intimately know this book and the world of Chris Kraus. And so I'm also aware of there's so much information that we also don't include in the show itself. And so there's that one part of it. And then also Kraus is an author, and part of the story is about her sharing objects from a box, many of these objects are books themselves, and she's really interested in like first editions of books and the quality of the paper and the actual artifact, the book. So that's part of why I think making a book is relevant. And then I feel like there may also be ways that I can incorporate more of the whole process of making the work itself that we experience. So some of our older design information. And then you'll also see that I'll go back to like in this image here, at one point in the show, we roll out this floor and all of the imagery that is on the floor that is then projected onto this back wall is sourced from the artwork and the references that Kraus makes in Aliens and Anorexia. And so it includes like the works of a lot of her friends and her contemporaries. And I think in a book form, I might be able to show some of those in more detail too. So I would say overall, Kraus is really interested in the personal archive, and that's something that also drove our making in this work. And I think I can capture something of that in a book object that sort of unfolds and has lots of different materials. And I think that's all I would, Is that okay?
No, that's amazing. Thanks so much, Meg. And you've hit on an ongoing kind of challenge that is sort of faced when we're exhibiting performance design as well in trying to capture a performance in a very small footprint, in a building away from the actual work itself. But yeah, amazing. And again, if you think of anything else you want to share, we can come back to it in question time as well. So
right.
I might ask you maybe if you could.
I say,
oh, sorry, yeah, please go ahead.
Just one more thing. I also just felt like because of the way that we worked the whole way through this process, we were always working as much as we could at one-to-one. So I never made a model box. I made drawings, but only for construction and some, but most of the things we prototyped up at one-to-one scale. So that's also meant that I have different kinds of process artifacts that I usually would in another show. So I think that's also affecting how I do it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Amazing. Thanks so much, Meg.
Yeah.
Well, I might ask you, and we're short and sharp today, and I'm sure there's, a lot more we could talk about there. But let me introduce our next speaker here. I'm just doing some jazz with Zoom for a second. And so our next speaker is Roger Alsop, who's currently joining us at about 20 past 5 in the morning over in Europe. And so thank you very much, Roger. So Roger is
It's a pleasure.
A multidisciplinary artist and curator, creates collaborative artworks in theatre, galleries, and music, exploring interactions of text, sound, and visual imagery through the arts. He has taught at Melbourne University for over 20 years, and lectured at Nikola Sala Conservatorium, Greenwich, Edinburgh, Zagreb, and Belgrade universities. His writing is internationally published. His works have been exhibited at venues including the Prague Quadrennial, Melbourne Festival, Theatre Lab NYC, and Colonist Picture Gallery. Thank you very much, Roger.
Thanks, Tessa. That I kind of wonder who that guy is sometimes. Thanks a lot, and good to see so many colleagues here. Fantastic. I'll just read out what my workshop is. I've actually got a few things going on at the Centerfest. One is this workshop. Another is a performance with a colleague from Rotterdam, and another workshop with colleagues from the US, India, and Brazil. And we're all kind of meeting, just like we're all meeting now today. So I'll just read the description of my workshop, because that's, I think, an interesting thing, and discuss some of the other works I'll be presenting, and then what I think is really great about whole world stage design and Prague Quadrennial processes. So tell me if I get boring. So, my workshop is called Sound to Scene, Sustainably Creating Place and Emotion. And this workshop will explore ways in which sound can be used to create a sense of place and location, or location, for a performance production, and simultaneously explore the creation of different emotional responses in the audience. In the workshop, we'll be using excerpts from scripts, such as the shaving scene from Botsek and how that might be informed by the use of sound, the entrance of Pozzo and Lucky in Waiting for Godot, interpersonal relationships in Sisu's Portrait of Dora. And this will be used as provocations that we can then kind of go, have a listen to this script. What sounds can you hear? How all the sounds inform that? And I used to, just as an example, I used to run, do the shaving scene from Botsek as a way for getting students to design sound. I guess, does everyone know that scene? It doesn't matter. It's quite an interesting scene on power balance. And I had one student who was just saying, I've got no idea what to do for this. And then he came up with this sound of horses trying to get out of a stable. Just this thing of power that's constrained and all of these things. And it just worked perfectly for as a backdrop, a sonic backdrop for that particular scene. So we'll be using those. We'll also be working with some videos, potentially, such as Pina Bausch's Bluebeard or Twyla Tharp's Push Comes to Shove, and Jola's Collage, and considering how sound informs the audience experience of these movements. Participants will explore a wide range of sounds, including music and text, reading, and processes for manipulating sounds to create a sense of location in the performer and the audience, and how to feel, and how this fills the emotional resonances in the audience, or supports the intended resonances of the actor, playwright, director, and so on. So hopefully that sounds interesting. Come along if you're going to be there. Come along; it will be fun. I've got another project which is working with the people from Brazil, the US, and India, and we're looking at how we're getting people together who are looking at how the various aspects of light, sound, and space and costume can interact and inform each other as they're going along in a performance. This is in its nascent stages. We're still kind of figuring out what we're going to do, but I'm sure it will be a wonderful thing, and that's going for 2 days. One of the great things about the Prague Quadrennial and the World Stage Design is that you get to meet so many people from all over the world who can be deeply embedded in your particular interest, and people of varying degrees of experience. Got colleagues who've won Tony Awards. One of the people who looks after the sound design was hired by NASA when in the celebration of Apollo 11 to recreate the sound of the Apollo 11 taking off. Got my other colleague who I'm doing my show with, just works almost continuously in new theatre in the Netherlands, which is just amazing. And he comes with so many different skill bases simply because he's always kind of stretching his boundaries or as he's going through the process of working. Another person who has become a very good friend who works with kind of dispersed performance. So she'll set up a performance which is simultaneously happening in Brazil, Delhi, Reykjavik, Melbourne, and so on. So we're kind of getting all of these very, very interesting things. The great thing about the Prague Quadrennial, particularly from my experience in the sound area, is that everyone is prepared to find an edge and then try and expand on it, try and work further than that, which is incredibly inspiring, as you can imagine. The performance that I'm doing is called Cube, and I was with my friend York from the Netherlands. We were thinking of something we'd like to do together because we just enjoy each other's company and thought it'd be good to put on a show. And we looked at Beckett's quad and how that could be represented orally, and instead of in 2 dimensions, like on a flat surface, to make it include the vertical axis as well. We like the idea of how IT might be used in this. So if anyone knows the play, we got IT to generate the inner monologues of each of the characters, and that was a very, very interesting process. Oh, sorry, not IT, AI. I mean, that was really interesting. We're kind of considering, as we're developing that particular performance, we're looking at different ways to look at that particular play and considering it more as a 4-part fugue that's been generated. So we're taking aspects of Bach's music and including it in this performance, all to be enjoyed for 20 minutes while sitting in a room surrounded by speakers. And hopefully we've got some interest in taking that to other places as well. So that's another really great thing, is that you get to test ideas with exceptionally good systems, and then create an opportunity for you and your colleagues to expand far further than just showing at PQ or World Stage Design. And you're also doing it with people who can bring responses that are not based in your own culture, which I find really interesting. You know, how does a woman from Brazil respond to this work in comparison to how does a man from Paris respond to this work? And we can kind of understand those things. And we're all sitting in an extraordinarily collegial situation discussing ideas. And that's also just one of the most exciting and enlightening things I think about being able to attend these things, particularly PQ and World Stage Design. Anyone? I'm happy to kind of take any questions now. I feel like I've run out of words.
Roger, I'll ask you a question to expand on what you've considered, and then we'll leave kind of general questions for the end. But when you're designing a workshop like this to run over, in overseas in another country, what sort of considerations do you think in terms of, how you're going to, who your participants are going to be, or how you're going to frame it, or how did you sort of approach designing the workshop itself that you're going to run?
I really wanted to introduce the idea of sound to people who maybe have a good understanding of the media in theatre and people who have less of an understanding. So in this, what I'm intending to do is use some, what I thought I'd do is just maybe come up with a little bit of a reading and then ask people what kind of sounds that would generate. What sounds do they think might be good for that? And then we'll discuss how will that affect the feeling that people have in the space they're in, which is in theatre, it's very often sitting in a seat with a bunch of people beside you. You're kind of sort of trapped in that environment. How can you make them experience maybe a much broader space or a much more confined space? And just looking at ways with this particular workshop of offering different views of what sound can actually do. So it's very open. My friend Jorg is also doing a sound walk the day before, and we'll be asking people to bring the sounds that they've recorded on that sound walk from Sharjah, bring them in. What's the sound of a car like? How does that make you feel? That sort of thing. So we're just really it'll be seat of the pants a lot, but with a very strong direction of how you emotionally respond to
Amazing.
sound. That's going to be the focus.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Roger. And again, yes, and everyone does have,
Pleasure.
if anyone does have questions, we'll have a question time together at the end. But I'll thank Roger for now, and I'll introduce our next two speakers. So next up we have our last speakers. So Imogen Ross and Paula Martins. Sorry, one more button. There we go. So Imogen Ross is a theatre designer of 30 years with a passion for eco-scenography and new work. She trained at WAPA, starting her early career in Melbourne on musicals, later moving to Sydney, where she was one of the founding founding members of the Tamara Rock Surfers at the old Fitzroy Theatre. She and Kristen Anderson co-wrote Performance Design in Australia back in 2000, the first book to examine the creative process of Australian designers in real time, and has gone on to develop the APD Green Conversations for the Australian Production Design Guild, where she continues to interview designers about their practices. Imogen is working at NIDA as their sustainability manager and currently studying for her honours in visual design at Griffith University in Queensland. So as part of the World Stage Design program, Imogen is hosting the Green Conversations Cafe over 4 nights in Sharjah, and she is joined at the cafe by fellow researcher, PhD candidate Paula Martins. Together, they plan to hold open-ended conversations and discussions with a variety of international designers, academics, and architects about the impact of climate change on their myriad practices. Thanks so much, Imogen. Thank you, Paula.
I was chuckling, Tessa, thank you so much for that introduction, because basically that introduction is actually what I was going to say. So it's pretty much covered what I was going to talk about. I should have realised that when I wrote that biog. So what Tessa was just describing is the Green Conversation Cafe, which is an idea that I proposed to World Stage Design as a way for colleagues, designers, architects, technicians, students to come together in a less formal fashion at the end of each evening, at the end of the conference program, to get together outside under the palms in the beautiful winter warmth of 36 degrees and share a cup of green tea, possibly a little green snack. I'm thinking pistachios, and engage in conversations with one another, specifically around the ways in which climate change is impacting on our work, in the way in which environmental sustainability practices are entering our conversations as designers and architects, and where we are heading in as an industry in terms of the way in which this is affecting us as designers, but also our audiences, our conversations around materials, about procurement, and about sort of end of life. Where do things go? How are they stored? And I know that because, as Roger was mentioning, people are going to be coming in from all around the world, each with a different, in a way, sort of part of the elephant that they're holding on to. imagining that, climate change and environmental sustainability is like this giant green elephant in the room, but everyone is holding a different part of that elephant and describing it from where they stand. So just as sort of Roger was saying, a French person may be experiencing the soundscape with a different meaning to someone from Brazil, I also think that this is an opportunity for different voices and different experiences to get together and discuss sort of this very prescient conversation that we're all having with one another, and inevitably the hard to solve things and the seeking of solutions, because we are small players in the big picture of the global climate crisis. But we are concerned by it because we're part of the storytelling mechanisms that spread those stories. So I'm not really taking a design over, but I have a design, I have a plan to engage designers and architects in conversations about this. And I'm keeping it very casual. We're running it over Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of the first week of the conference, the 20th to the 23rd. It's only scheduled for 1 hour at the end of the program, between 6:30 and 7:30 p.m. And it's outdoors. So of course we'll have ambient light, ambient sound, but we've also set it up in such a way that conversations can be had. We're using a traditional Middle Eastern seating circle with rugs and cushions and low tables. We'll be serving traditional green tea. There will be a background against which invited speakers might come and introduce a topic or an idea. But I'm wanting to keep it less conferencey and more discursive. This has kind of come about, interestingly, as Tessa was talking about my background. It's come about because I've always been interested in conversations with other designers. Back when I was in my early 20s, I started on a project with my colleague, Kristen Anderson, that ended up becoming a book, Performance Design in Australia, that took 7 years to write and research and put together, but was published in 2000 by Craftsman House. And that involved over 90 voices of designers around Australia, and directors and theatre critics and writers, talking about what it was to be a designer and what their process was. And at that stage, most of the designers we spoke to said that no one had ever bothered to ask them those questions, that to delve into their process in that way, and that it was wonderful to then read other designers' processes and to realize that, one, you're not alone, but also that we are all coming at it from a slightly different perspective. There are different things that feed us creatively and imaginatively. And that has then sort of continued on as my sort of interest in how designers think. When I was encouraged by Stephen Curtis and Eamon Darcy in NIDA to start a conversation about sustainability and green practices with the Australian Production Design Guild. And so I started the Australian Production Design Guild Green Conversations about 5 years ago, encouraging designers both in screen and live performance to talk about their process and practice and concerns to do with making sustainable theatre. So that's sort of been chugging along in different ways. Sometimes I interview designers, sometimes I just gather information about what's happening in the green space. But it continues to intrigue me, and and I have since started working at NIDA as their sustainability manager, which has enabled me to continue these conversations, not only with designers, teachers, and now students, as we wrestle and grapple with the issue of how to reduce our carbon footprint in this time, when there are so many nuanced responses to making sustainable theatre. And it's not always the most obvious solution that you might think, because everything has a carbon footprint and everything is emitting carbon. The whole world emits carbon as we are meant to and brings it down, of course. So how do we find balance in our work? And then I was very lucky to be connected with Paula Martins through my postgraduate studies at Griffith, who is also engaging in conversation with designers around the world and asking them questions about their sustainable practice. So we've buddied up at World Stage Design to work together as a sort of double-headed green dragon to talk to designers and architects. Paula, can I segue to you for a moment just to describe the focus of your work?
Sure. My research focuses on the intersection between sustainability and perform designs, and I have this 1-year project in Australia. I'm originally from Brazil, where I research sustainability in São Paulo theater context. But here in Australia this year, I'm trying to understand the motivation behind the scenographers. So back in home, I am trying to understand what we are doing. And sometimes this sustainable motivation is not behind, but we are doing sustainability for move it from using other reasons. But now I'm focusing on understand when you have a motivation as a designer, when or a sustainable or ecological motivation behind your practice. It's what I'm trying to understand, and that's why it connects so well with Green Conversations Cafe proposed from Imogen.
Thank you, Paula. It's actually really exciting to be collaborating together, though we are both flying by the seat of our pants at the moment because we're both working on different projects in different states. But coming together in 6 to 8 weeks' time over in Sharjah. And I think I'm at time, Tessa, if I've hit my time.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. There we go. I'll unmute myself. Thanks so much, Imogen. And Paula, that was perfectly timed. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to bring back our speakers into the spotlight. I love how Zoom calls it a spotlight. I don't know if someone's written a paper about the theatricality of Zoom yet. They probably have. And just take a moment to say thank you so much, all of you, for sharing about the amazing work that you do every day, but also what you're going to be doing over World Stage Design. And we've got this breadth of, everything from finalists in exhibition, for design awards through to workshops and performances and conversations. And so it's a really amazing breadth of different ways you're engaging with World Stage Design. So in the time that we've got left, if anyone has any questions, please pop it in the chat. You can also raise your hand as well, and I'll come to you. While people are writing questions or having a think, I'll pose one to the team here. And you've answered this in various ways, but I'll ask you again. I'm interested in your motivation for getting involved in World Stage Design. What was your why? And it's kind of what drove you to be engaged or involved this year. And I might start with Meg, if that's okay, as our first presenter from today. And then I'll go to Roger and then to Imogen.
Yeah, I had a few different reasons. And some of them I feel like maybe, oh no, I think I could just say what they are and that would be fine. Things like World Stage Design, particularly I think for us in Aotearoa, and I assume similarly for folk in Australia, are such a great opportunity to share your work with other people, and particularly big works like Gravity and Grace, which we would love to tour internationally, but it would be quite an undertaking to do. These things like World Stage Design offer another way of sharing that work, and so it's both in the sharing of it, but then also in I would say it's strategic, because by sharing it, more people would know about the work, and I guess we're always looking for opportunities for future collaboration and and to work together. And then also I feel like we don't have a huge I guess design or performance design industry in New Zealand, and any opportunities to be able to talk about design and the value and its necessity within the live performance context. I basically will go for that. So I guess there's a little bit of a industry and community building thing here. Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Meg. Roger, your thoughts.
For me, it's spending time with like-minded and not necessarily so like-minded colleagues. It's an incredibly interesting way to develop ideas. One of the things that I find, I was talking with my partner about this talk last night, and one of the things that I find really interesting about sound is that it is very dependent on technology. And the way that technology is developing at the moment is quite extraordinary. Might be subtle things, and like sound being invisible, they're often things that we don't see. But when you consider how those technologies can be used to create a response in an audience, they can be extremely profound. And it's really great being in an environment where people are at the cutting edge of that kind of technology. So for me, that's the incredibly interesting thing of just testing ideas. Like for us with this thing of, can I make a voice sound like it's going like that? And my head turns that way, and then I follow it around. How can I kind of create the invisible and make it corporeal for the audience, that sort of thing? And knowing that I have at my hands the technology which will allow me to experiment with that idea, and people who are going, wow, that sounds awesome, let's give it a run, instead of, I don't think that'll fit our budget. It's just extraordinarily exciting, and that's pretty much it, really. It's just great, and that you kind of get the sense of being in a wonderful team. I think sometimes it can be a bit lonely going from show to show, whatever, but to develop that sense of a very strong collegiality is also great, and everyone is really open. So for me, that's the best part of it.
Amazing. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks.
Imogen and Paula, your why for getting involved with World Stage Design.
Paula, would you like to go first this time?
Sure. Well, as a researcher and a performance costume and set designer, it's amazing, an amazing opportunity to go to a place like this, to an event like this with people from all parts of the world, and connect and change ideas, and especially thinking about the research, the possibilities, meet in person with this variety of people is a big why. And also, I'm going as a volunteer, and I also need to acknowledge my scholarship that provides me financial support to travel to Sharjah as part of my research, and also working as a volunteer in World Stage Design that gives me the support and accommodation. So it's the why and how it turns it possible, because it's not easy for a postgraduate student to travel so far and spend so long in this financial situation. But yeah, that's it.
My turn. I wanted to say I totally agree with what Meg and Roger was just saying about community building and finding community when we often work as the one person in our role, in our work situations. So I've found both World Stage Design and PQ to have saved me as a freelance designer at the various times that I've dropped into them. I think I've been to 2 PQs, and this will be my second World Stage Design over the course of 30 years. And each time I've gone, it's always lifted me to another place. It's reminded me that, yes, I'm doing the thing I'm good at. Yes, my way of doing things is not completely wacky and weird. There's a whole bunch of other wacky and weird people just here doing the same thing. It's built my confidence, and it's saved me from leaving the industry, these events. And I think I'm very excited about this particular World Stage Design because it's the first time I'm going as an active participant as opposed to a tourist or or somebody who's just there to observe. At the last PQ, I was part of the Australian contingent, but again, it was very on the sidelines. Whereas this time, I feel like I'm actually actively engaged, which is really exciting. It feels like I'm lifting myself to another place, and challenging myself to be involved in ways I haven't been involved before. So I'm finding that, again, that's very exciting to be part of a community that encourages that. Yeah.
I'll unmute myself. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. I think you sort of capture the various everything from community building to sort of strategic kind of engagement and exposure of work. Also perhaps possibly furthering your networks or research as well. But also at the same time, Paula, thank you for also acknowledging, that this sort of travel and involvement costs money. And so sometimes it kind of has to be some strategic ways that we, and I'm really glad you mentioned that you're volunteering, because that's, as you mentioned, that's giving you some support to be involved. And so that's kind of my segue into the next question, and I'll ask this one. And of course, if anyone else has any other questions, please do pop it in the chat. But this is probably around thinking about what advice might you give people who in 4 years' time, wherever World Stage Design might be, to think about in terms of, if they've heard about your work today, or they've heard about the workshops or the initiatives that you're running, and they're thinking, man, I'd love to do that, or I've got a great idea, I could definitely do that. What advice would you have to them about maybe the application process or how to think about being involved in World Stage Design? I can pick someone to go first if you like, or Roger.
Yeah, for me, I think it's just come up with an idea and pitch it. That's all there is, really. And the great thing about the World Stage Design community is that it's very broad. So you'll get people who might look at your project and think, what is that? And others who go, wow, that's the most awesome thing I've ever heard. And then they can find out amongst themselves as to whether or not you actually get a spot. And I think with these sorts of things, it's very easy, particularly when you're beginning in this sort of, to think that spots get filled and there's going to be a whole lot of far more experienced and et cetera people than me that are going to be putting forward their ideas. But it's a very level playing field. If you've got a good idea and you look like someone who can acquit it, you're more than likely going to be in. So just have a shot. That's what I'd say.
I can add to that, Tessa. I can add to what Roger said. I proposed the Green Conversation Cafe while I was in discussions about the Theatre Green Book launch into Arabic, which is happening over there. So my original intention was to travel to World Stage Design as a punter, and then I was asked to be involved in the Theatre Green Book launch in Arabic, which made sense because of my role at NIDA has been quite heavily involved in the rollout of Theatre Green Book. And then I just happened to say, I would love to have a green conversation cafe to engage people in these conversations in a more casual, ongoing manner. And Jackie George, the convener of World Stage Design, said, sure, send me a proposal. And it was as easy as that, and I couldn't believe that it was as simple as actually saying, I've got this good idea. What do you reckon? And if she'd thought it was a stupid idea, I'm sure she would have said, I'm sure she has no problem saying that. So it was quite surprising to me that the gate's open. It's not closed.
Amazing. Thank you, Imogen. Meg, your perspective of or advice you might have for people, and again, you're particularly coming from this experience of applying and being a finalist in the exhibition side of the event.
Yeah, sure. I this is my first World Stage Design, so I've been involved with PQ in various roles for I think 4 different times. But yeah, so I don't feel I have heaps of advice other than to say just apply. I was worried about what I had submitted and what was the best way to share my work. But I'm really glad I did. And I guess you don't exactly know what people are looking for, but you would, yeah, I would also just say include video. If you are submitting, if you have the video or document, I think that kind of documentation really helps to contextualize what some of the still photography and drawings and things might be referencing. But yeah, I think I was thrilled that I did it. So it's just doing it.
Just doing it. Yeah, that's great, Meg. And I think, and I can see, and Simon's got his hand up, and I'll come to him next. And I think, one thing probably there's to be conscious of, if you're thinking about it, be aware of the timelines of when those because the World Stage Design might be in 4 years, but those applications to the various stages will start rolling out a year or more prior to that. Simon, please, your question.
Thanks, Tessa. Just hi, Roger.
Hi, Simon. Yeah.
But my question's actually for Imogen. Really curious about the outcome from your cafe conversations. Is there any plan to, I don't know, maybe not publish, but share, the outcome? Because it'd be really interesting. I imagine you'll get so many sort of different ideas and aspects. Which is where, my background is sort of low budget theatre and coming up with resourceful solutions. And I feel there's a bit of a crossover with sustainability. And yeah, it'd be really fascinating to hear all the different ways people are trying to sort of go down that path or lean more towards being sustainable.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Simon. That's why I engage in those conversations, because I think they are really interesting. And I also think knowledge sharing is key. Cross-communication and knowledge sharing across countries, across companies, across experience and age is so important, because even though we live in a time of such communication, so many things fall through the gaps. The thing that I'm just in the middle of sort of thinking about, and in fact, Paula and I haven't spoken about this yet, but we're just, one of the things to solve before we go is, do we record it outside in the early evening and then edit it back, or take notes? We do have, I'm very lucky that not only Paula, but there's another couple of volunteers who are engaged with the Green Conversation Cafe. So we do have the ability to take notes and to record it if we wish. But ideally, what happens is that some of the people who have a lot to share will then engage with Paula and her research, because she definitely will be recording the interviews and writing it up as part of her PhD research. I might just throw to you, Paula, quickly for what you plan to do with the recordings of the interviews that will happen from the Green Conversation Cafe.
Yeah, well, we need definitely to discuss this a little bit more. I'm not intending to publish the interviews, like the videos or recording itself, but my main focus is to publish an article reflecting all the findings from the interviews. But it's something that I still in process. So. But
I think I might just add to that, Paula, saying I'm definitely intending on sharing what is learnt through both ScenoLab and the Australian Production Design Guild channels that I have access to, both in my quarterly newsletters with APDG and these kind of webinars that ScenoLab is hosting. So we'll definitely be sharing and reporting back from the Green Conversation Cafe and World Stage Design.
And I might pick up there, Imogen, because we had also talked about in November. So we're in, we're just about to hit September. We won't have a talk in October, but in November, we had talked about doing a bit of reflection, wrap-up discussion on world stage design in another forum like this. And so maybe that might be a forum to share early observations of what came out of those with, as well as anyone else who's engaged with world stage design, people who are speaking today, anyone else who wants to share. But yeah, that's a really great question, Simon, because there's going to be some very interesting perspectives that comes out of it. Everybody, I'm conscious that we just hit 1 hour, and so I will officially wrap us up. I have just shared in the chat some links to at least one link for our speaker and where you can find out more about them and get in contact with them. But I do want to thank Meg and Roger and Imogen and Paula for their time today. Thank you to everybody who came along and attended as well. It's a real pleasure to have you all today to talk and to celebrate your work and to know that it's going to be on the world stage, literally world stage design is really wonderful. And if you do want to learn more about ScenoLab Australia, I put a link to the chat there. You can sign up to join us and join our emailing list. That's all free at the moment. And we hope to see you and chat with you more in conversations like this. And then if you happen to be attending World Stage Design, we'd love to meet you in person. We'll go have a green tea with Imogen and Paula and talk about sustainability. But other than that, thank you so much, everybody, for attending today. And I will conclude our session now. Thank you.